Welcome back, everybody. Derrick Soo, your East Oakland advocate. Well, it's a sad day. And to, what I want to do, I want to talk about some of the memories of Macy's San Francisco since its closing. And my mother worked at Macy's before I was even born. In fact, it was the location where my mother and father met. My mother worked for Macy's at the time, and she was in the furniture department as a clerk. And they were selling TVs. TVs were the big things uh, at the period. And because we're talking about the 60s here and the 50s. 50s, the TVs were brand new things. They were black and white TVs, and it was new. And also broadcasting, TV broadcasting had just started in the Bay Area in 1948. So televisions. My dad was a television serviceman, and one of the people who serviced TVs that had issues or developed an issue once it got into your home. And so my father would pick up uh, assignments there at Macy's to go fix TVs. So that was how my mother and father met, and then I came along, and I was raised a Macy's kid. You want to talk about a person who had brand loyalty? My mother, she was extremely brand loyal. In fact, growing up between for the entire household, our household was pretty much outfitted with whatever was needed, and it came from Macy's. And I'll tell you why my mother was such a loyalist and such a strong brand follower. The Macy's brand was because it had everything, and also uh, she got a 20% employee discount. And how she got that employee discount was something called credit. Credit in the 50s was unheard of. An official credit. You may have some department store credit cards, but like Macy's. Macy's was one of the early department stores that had its own credit card. Capwell's, HC Capwell's, right here in Oakland, had their own credit department. Liberty House had their own credit. And so my mother, because she was an employee, in order to get her discount, they had to open and extend a credit card account to my mother, and they knew her income. She knew that she was good for it. She worked there a number of years, and so uh, that's how my mother became such brand loyal, because of the heavy discounts. And it was substantial for a growing young family at the time, especially in the 60s. And 60s had a lot of turmoil. There was a lot of civil rights protests right there in Union Square. I remember her not being able to come home a couple of times because of the rioting that was going on in San Francisco, right outside Macy's. Macy's has been a brand that my mother stayed loyal to. Everything practically in our kitchen, all of our dinnerware, our eating utensils, our clothing came from Macy's. One of the things that I really hated, I had a real love hate relationship with Macy's, because my mother was so brand loyal. She would not buy anything. If Macy's didn't have it, we didn't need it. That was kind of her idea. My dad thought the other way, and so there were a lot of financial discussions about credit, because my dad at the time, he's a young father just getting established, and he had just in 1962 he just got his United States citizenship. From 1946 to 1962, it took him that long to get his citizenship. He immigrated here with his family legally in 1946 from Hong Kong. And so, anyway, the shoes that I wore weren't shoes that I like. My mother tended to buy the dressier shoes, and that was one of the things. If you're a kid in elementary school, like I was, and you go to school in hush puppies rather than Converse, but I wasn't even able to get Converse because Converse was not sold in Macy's. That's a sports athletic shoe, and Macy's didn't cater to to the sports scene like that, and so it was hush puppies, and yeah, being ridiculed in elementary school, does wonders for your psyche, because everybody else is wearing different type of shoes. I for my play shoes, I had Keds. Do you remember the old Keds? Uh, and what was that? PF Flyers, it comes to mind. That was sold through Macy's. Uh, my pants, all of my pants. It took me until I bought my own clothes before I had a pair of jeans, because Levi's weren't being sold in Macy's at the time in the 60s and much of the 70s. And so I tended to wear, if you went to school with me, you always saw me well dressed or dressed above average. And that was on purpose because my mother bought everything at Macy's, and my dad, he only took me to AGE for my shoes. But AGE had shoes that Macy's didn't have, which were sports shoes and dedicated sports shoes. And I had to buy my own sports shoes at AGE. So I took my Christmas money and birthday money to buy shoes there rather than be stuck with the shoes that I really hated, which were the Hush Puppies from Macy's. But also at the same time, because of the department stores, in came for the first time credit cards of from the bank backed credit cards. And my mother was one of the first people that jumped on board. I believe it was right around 1967 she got her first Wells Fargo credit card, and she had her Macy's card, her Liberty House card, HC Capwell's credit card, because those were the only things that she could get at the time, because uh, the uh, the discrimination on women at the time, and even when they were well established in the work world, there was still a lot of discrimination, and on credit too. And my dad was one of those who fought credit, but eventually, because his bank, Bank of America, offered him Bank AmeriCard, which is now Visa, uh, was was one of the things how he got started, because he needed that to establish credit, more credit, so that he could buy cars and things that were needed for the home. My mother, she had Wells Fargo, that's MasterCard back then. So we literally saw the wars going between Visa and MasterCard, Bank AmeriCard, and Wells Fargo. Bank of America, which was originally known as the Bank of Italy, and it became the Bank of America in the 20s. So that was the little history lesson. But my mother was very loyal to the brand. Even a lot of our furniture in our home came from uh, Macy's furniture department. My first bicycle, I bought from Macy's because my mother wouldn't go anywhere else. My dad tried to take me to Sears, and my mother stopped that. She said, "Nope, we're going to get that bicycle from Macy's because I get a 20% discount." My eyeglasses growing up, when I needed eyeglasses, they had optometry there. So there was that department store meant a lot to our family growing up. I literally was a Macy's kid, a Macy's outfitted kid, up until, what was that? Until my mother retired. And she retired after 32 years of And I believe that was, when was that? That was in the 80s, in the mid 80s. She retired after 32 years of service to Macy's, and so it was a good long time. And again, like I said, I had a love-hate relationship with Macy's. When I got out on my own, I stayed away from Macy's because everything that was ground into my head from my mother, Macy's this, Macy's that, I just wanted to get away from Macy's. And what happened? My second wife was a, another big fan of Macy's, and it was difficult getting her out of Macy's, but it was even more difficult getting her out of Nordstrom's, the other big department store that has left San Francisco. So San Francisco's in a world of hurt, and we're also seeing how astronomically high rent on these stores is affecting business, because that's what goes into a lot of your price tag, is paying the rent for that building, keeping the lights on, keeping the employees paid, making sure that there's inventory in the store for you to look at, if not buy. And then we have the people, the thieves, the criminals who steal, and they help drive up that cost too, because the stores, they can't afford to absorb that loss. And so those costs are passed along to you, the end consumer. And so that's why we have to work on minimizing criminal theft. As I worked in retail, we saw it. We even had employees at Grand Auto stealing from Grand Auto. So theft and criminality is a big problem. And Macy's, it's sad to see something that has been around, an established business that has been around for well over 100 years, leave permanently. We'll probably maybe have one or two, maybe a handful of Macy's smaller stores, or even a downsized Macy's here in the local area. But Bloomingdale's, I don't expect Bloomingdale's to be around that much longer either, because the high cost of rent, the greed of property management, property managers, they're the blood-sucking leeches of our country, and we need to own the property, not leasing the properties, not leasing the buildings, but we need to own the property that our businesses sit on. That's why my model takes us back to a very early time, back to the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, where businesses owned the property they sat on. My grandfather owned, my great-grandfather owned the property that the Pacific Coast Cannery here in Oakland sat on. He owned that property before it was constructed. He owned it. And then businesses that succeed, that were able to control their overhead expenses, owned their property. That's why you need to own your home, but we need to make it affordable. Thanks for joining me today. What are your memories about Macy's? Were they good? Were they bad? Or did you, like me, have a love-hate relationship with the name and brand Macy's?